right, this is the follow up, and we are following up today on a live video I did on George's Space Chat pretty much a year ago, entitled Subbing. And my guest today on the follow up is the great Sherisse Rogers. Sherisse, thank you so much for making yourself available, and welcome to the follow up.
Thank you for having me, George.
Oh,
Always a
my
pleasure.
pleasure. Oh, my pleasure. Absolutely. So, for those watching, for those listening, we are talking today about subbing, the subject subbing. Um, the way how I met Cherise was that she came in to learn the book Memphis, I believe. And she was pretty much, in all the years that I've done musical theater, I might be skipping one or two players, but Cherise came in and learned the book in 2 weeks and then gave me a call and said, listen, I'm ready, put me in. And the reason why I wanted her on the follow up today was because that response is exactly what I am looking for when I'm looking for a sub. I basically want to hear from the sub, I'm ready, put me on, I can do this. So let me open it up to you, Cherise. Why don't you share your process of subbing, and how do you get to the place where 2 weeks later, after being presented the material, you are able to call and confidently say, I got this, put me on.
Okay, well, a couple different things happen. The first thing I'll say
Mm-hmm.
is that I have a photographic memory.
Wow.
So
Okay.
it's the better term is an eidetic memory because the same way I can read something that's on a page and I can basically create a snapshot of it in my head. I
Mm-hmm.
only really have to listen to a song maybe two or three times before I have the whole thing. Now, granted, a whole Broadway show that's going to take a lot longer.
Mm-hmm.
But so what my process is like, so when I know I'm going to sub for you, like, I'll get the conductor's, video or disc or
Mm-hmm.
whatever I can have that I can keep in my car, keep in my, my headphones. I
Mm-hmm.
just listen to it over and over and over again before
Mm.
I start reading it. Like
Right.
before I even have the music, if I can have just the music with me, I just make sure that that's in my ear
Yeah.
all the time. That way,
Yeah.
when I start reading it, I'm kind of reading it, but I'm hearing it in my head at the same time. So it kind of happens at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously, I know that that doesn't work for anyone, but for me, uh, I'm sure you're a far better reader than I am, and most of you cats are. I read okay,
Mm.
but I don't. Well, I probably shouldn't say. I read. I'm a decent reader, but I can't read with fly
Yeah.
shit or whatever. I'm a little dyslexic, so my gift is my ears. So I don't make the same mistakes twice because if
Mm.
I hear it, I can kind of absorb it. So I tend to like very much absorb music pretty quickly.
Mm-hmm.
So every show that I've learned, and it started with Hairspray, I know Frankie wanted me because that was the first show and because I was young and trying to make a good impression. I tried to learn that show as quick as possible. So I probably ran the show, um, three or four times a day, like backwards and forwards.
Let's just so sorry to interrupt you, but let's just also let the audience know that Hairspray was the original bass player was Francisco Centeno, the great Francisco Centeno. So you learned his book, okay?
Yeah, and now and since we're going to talk about Francisco, like you should know, like he's very much known for going off the book.
Right,
So
right,
it's not as much with his books as like making sure that you can read. Is like you have to capture what he's playing. So
right.
that's where the ears come in. So
Yeah.
I've been fortunate, like my ears are pretty good, so I can definitely like pick up what someone else is doing, like trying to grab their style. If
Mm-hmm.
I had to like if let's say if someone tried to transcribe everything Frankie wrote, like all the ad libs, and I had to read it, it wouldn't have been as successful as me just kind of diving into trying to sound like
Right,
him.
right, right.
Um, so with
So
Memphis, I it pretty much did the same thing.
okay, 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 okay. So ears first, then the written material, and then kind of putting it all together by playing
Yeah.
through it, as many times as possible. Do you have a process like I know some players like to go song by song. Some players go like act by act. Do you have sort of a process what that is concerned? Do you have anything that would set you up for that?
I do it both ways. So I would do
Mm.
like I always try to do. I start trying to practice the page turns
Mm-hmm.
first
Yeah.
because I remember that being the hardest thing with Hairspray. I remember like the only time I really got in trouble a little bit was just like because I was like throwing pages on the ground, and
Yeah,
so
yeah,
they
yeah,
would get
yeah.
out of sequence. So ever since then, I was like the first thing I want to practice, and since I have the music in my ear, is making sure I can transition from one song to the next
Yeah.
like the proper way, whether I have to set up my own page turns or if I'm using their book, like knowing how it's done. So I kind of start trying to do song after song after song first. Like I'll try to go all the way through the first act.
Yeah.
And then let's say like I remember like I messed up song number 2. Let me get this under my fingers. Then I'll go back and, you know, shed it and isolate it and do it with a metronome if I need to, if it's difficult for me or whatever. But I try to, from the start, practice it in the timing so that my body is used to the timing and used to the motion of turning the pages, and like that kind of stuff.
Yeah. The choreography is what we
Right.
we usually call it.
Yeah.
Like that can really trip you up. That's
Yeah.
just no two ways about it. It can, especially in the subbing situation, in the subbing chair, that can trip you up, and it can be the easiest thing that you've done a million times, turning a page. All of a sudden, you're picking up two pieces of paper as opposed to just one, and you're behind. You know this.
Yeah, and I remember Frankie saying like, my pages are out of sequence. What's going on? And it's like, are you throwing the pages on the floor? And I was like, yeah. And so I realized I realized like he had auditioned me because I was a new kid. He auditioned me to play the show, and I did a good job with the show, but I still hadn't mastered the page turns because I wasn't used to going that fast.
Yeah.
And I mean, I don't know that I messed it up all that much, but I know I put his book out of sequence, and it made me aware of like the page turns are almost as important, because if you miss a page turn and now you can't play because the page is dropped, then you didn't practice the time, you didn't practice the choreography. And I'm a little clumsy, so like I have to do extra, like, let me make sure I know what my body is doing.
Yeah, for sure. Now, musically, okay, so now you have the book, you have a recording. Do you prefer recording? Do you prefer video? Does it matter?
I would prefer like the conductor's recording, like the original thing that I got. It had the conductor video of Lon Hoyt, and then I had Frankie's bass track, but I definitely haven't always gotten that. Sometimes I've just gotten the recording. And then I had to come and watch how the conductor cued, come and watch the book a couple of times just to like visually remember it. But for me, like I said, because I have the photographic memory, it's easier for me to have the visual so that I can always remember like when I'm supposed to look up.
Right.
And I would actually even like have try to position like my wherever my video was, so that it's not at eye level, because the conductor's never going to be really here, at least it hasn't been in my experience. So I have to be used to like looking up or looking over. So I try to set myself up to where my eyes almost have that same photographic, like they know where to go and when.
Yeah. That makes a lot of sense. Yeah. There's all these little micro movements. You want to set yourself up the way, in the way they are going to happen once you're in the seat. I totally get that. That makes a lot of sense. Now, okay, so we have the recording, we have the music. How about notes on the music? Anything like, do you write yourself notes into it? Do you transcribe stuff, like, or is it mostly memorized?
It's mostly memorized. Like I know I've definitely seen people like with Frankie stuff. I guess I could have taken the time to write out all his ad libs.
Yeah.
But that just would have been too much for me, and the book would have looked a mess. So I think I would write little things in parentheses like Frankie, and I just remember that on that, for that bar or 2 bars or whatever, it's not exactly the ink. It's like, remember that lick that he played.
Yeah.
And I've kind of gotten into the habit to do it. Like I know there's a whole system of like how to edit your book where people use the parentheses for notes so they don't play. I never learned any of that.
Yeah.
Really, I kind of picked up on it later, but I never learned that. So I kind of have my own little system where I just make little notes. But I try to, my eyes, because I said I'm a little dyslexic, the more stuff I put on the page, the more confusing it is for me. So I just try to like, for me, I need minimal notes. That's why my ears come in. They kind of compensate for that. For what other people have. They can look at a lot of stuff on the page and read it all and grasp it all. I can't do that. So I have to kind of use like what's in my memory, and then like make little notes to remind myself, like little mnemonics, like Frankie, like use this here, like little stuff.
Oh, that is gold. That is so important, and it's so important, and thank you for sharing all that, because that is really good information. Like a lot of times, even when it comes to the subject of subbing, now you have a lot of information out there, and everybody's talking about, oh, subbing is so hard, and myself included. Like I still see it as the hardest gig in town. There's just no two ways about it. Very few people tell you, how do you do it? Like how the hell do you how do you survive 2.5 hours with anywhere between 4 to 20 to 40 people sitting there and listening to you under a microscope, right?
Oh yeah,
It's a
it'd be
lot.
nerve wracking.
It is.
Nerve wracking.
It totally is. There's no doubt about that. So let's go to another part of subbing. Because the other thing, like especially like let's say Memphis, you have to come in, you have to play my bass. Our two basses, like the way you like your setup, my setup, are quite different. Um, you have to play with a pick, with Memphis, or you had to play with a pick with Memphis. Um, you couldn't just play it with the fingers, and you had to use my instrument. How do you deal with that? Like, is there some sort of, and of course I'm asking, somewhat rhetorically because I know the answer. Nevertheless, I think it would be interesting to hear from you. Um, what is a process there, like, or what could be a process?
Well, I mean, I honestly I haven't had a whole lot of conflict in that area. Like, so the very first show
Hmm.
with Francisco,
Hmm.
they allowed me to use my bass
Wow.
the
Okay.
first couple times, but then they allowed me to use the first couple times because my hands, I don't have super strong hands for a bass player. So Frankie's action was always a little bit higher.
Hmm.
Um, but my bass sounded so different from
Hmm.
theirs, they actually made me switch. So when that happened, I just basically had to strengthen my hands a lot more and all this other stuff. But like for your bass,
Hmm.
I was definitely like using one of those squeezy things because like you have clearly strong hands because your action was
Yeah.
something else. But
Okay.
and I was prepared to do it. But that's for me, that's the hardest thing being a bass player who's not like has beast hands because every once in a while
Hmm.
someone will hand you a bass and I'm like my action is pretty low.
Right. Right. Right.
So that's really the hardest thing for me. But luckily, for the most part, most of the shows have allowed me to play my own bass or like with like Kinky Boots or whatever. Like Mike Vasilia's bass had a similar action. So or it's been like
Hmm.
the same kind of similar. I
Hmm.
think
Hmm.
your bass was the only time where it was like drastically different, and I was like, and the same with the playing the pick. I
Hmm.
really took those 2 weeks and was really shedding that because I had never played with the pick before, and I haven't really
Hmm.
had it done a whole lot since. I'm not really great with that. That's something I need to get better at. But like I really dove into it. I really
Hmm.
tried to play. I tried to even play stuff in the book that wasn't
Hmm.
on pick just to get my hands used to it, just to kind of like get my hands used to something that was different.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
but yeah,
Yeah.
that's definitely an issue.
Yeah.
At least for me, like I said, because I don't have, you know,
Yeah. 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 No, that
the
makes
strong hands in the world.
that makes a lot of sense. For what it's worth, it is the other way around as well. Like if I'm presented with a bass with super low action, and my action has come down considerably, so now it's perhaps not high anymore. It's
But people telling
me.
you your subs
I
are coming to you with arthritis, like
this is true. I'm not even making this up. Doing Lady Day now. This is, mind you, this is on the upright. Doing Lady Day, and one of my subs was the great Ugano Okegwo, bass player here in the city.
yeah.
Really well known for straight ahead bass playing. Like that's what he does. He plays upright bass, straight ahead, hard bop, like 24/7, right? Uganda comes in, kills the show, plays it perfectly, beautifully. The next day, I get a phone call that it's Uganda, and he's like, dude, your bass is, I don't know if I can do this, because like my hand is now not moving.
Oh
he
wow.
was he was playing my bass, and it was a problem, so ever since Lady Day, I definitely have taken that to heart, and kind of brought my action down from what I consider to be considerable, but I've been told that it's still high. Nevertheless, it goes the other way around as well. I had to sub for who was it? Dave Kuhn, I believe. David Kuhn, Kuhn, however you pronounce that, on upright, and his upright is set up with a super low action, and I could play one note, the first note, which was an E flat, Annie. The show was Annie at the Broadway Theater or whatever it was, the Palace Theater. I forgot the name of the theater, but I played the first note perfectly, E flat, beautifully.
Hmm.
After that, there was nothing coming out of that bass. It was a total disaster. The strings were straight up, right flat against the fingerboard. I could not make that bass sound. Period. Like, and then forget about pizzicato, but then with the bow as well, doing
Oh
arco,
yeah.
nothing. It was just nothing coming out. So it's both ways. Like, if you're used to a certain setup, and the regular player has a different setup, play on the regular player's setup, like, a lot. Take that, and just work with it, because otherwise you're gonna be stranded. I definitely noticed that.
Yeah,
Um,
I think that's something to be said. I think more people would probably benefit from if it's a show where they say you cannot bring in your own bass, you have to play what's there. Then
right,
if you're like me, I got to come in and play your bass because I can't come in
right.
having practiced on my bass and I show up and now my hands, I can only make it through the first three songs because now my hands are on fire.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
That would
yeah,
be
yeah.
a disaster.
Yeah, yeah,
So
yeah, yeah. That makes a lot of sense, and that was, in my example, that was the big mistake that I made. Like, I didn't go in and play the other dude's bass. And it came back to haunt me, because that didn't work out. I had to call him and be like, you know what, I'm sorry, I can't do this.
right.
I can't play your bass. There's nothing coming out. So very cool. All right, so let's move forward. We kind of talked about the whole process of getting ready, right? Now
Mm-hmm.
let's go and let us follow you. Paint a picture. Let us follow you. First time you go in to play a show, what do you do?
Oh, first time I go in to play the show, I'm there
Yeah.
early. Like as
Okay.
early as they'll allow me to be in there.
Yeah.
It was a normal hour or whatever the union. Whenever I can get in there, I always ask the bass player, what's the earliest I'm allowed to show up?
Yeah.
And then I get in there and I basically just make whatever adjustments I need
Mm.
as far as the space, because like I've already practiced the motions and what I'm going to be doing. So if I need to slide the stand over a little bit, like I try to always make notes of like so that I can put stuff back
Yeah.
where it was, so that I'm not messing up the normal person's spot.
The regular
But I try to
spot there.
basically make sure that I have everything set up, that my pages are set up.
Yeah.
I make sure that the Avion mix is right. I'm there a good hour before, making sure that my strings are, especially if it's the first night, if it's my bass, my strings are fresh. I'm just going in there like it's the very first time. Like I don't know any of these people. I want it to be the best possible representation of myself.
Yeah.
So and I I had got some anxiety and stuff like that. So and most people are nervous when they're first subbing on the show anyway.
Yeah.
But like I definitely get anxious. So it's like it gets me there enough time to like calm down. So
Yeah.
even if the first half an hour I'm doing all this other stuff, then I give myself a half an hour or 20 minutes before the show to like leave the pit and calm down or go get tea or just whatever I do. Like I don't like coming in to rush,
Mm.
because then I feel it already adds to the anxiety. So as early as I can possibly get there, setting up tuned, I'll try to warm up my hands a bit, and then I'll just try to. And normally I have in my head, here are the three songs that I remember being a little bit more challenging for me, and I'll go over those.
Mm-hmm.
Most of the time, obviously, if I call you and I say, yeah, I'm ready, I can play the whole show. But there might
Right.
be a song or two where I'm like, oh, this is the one I'm no, it's a little bit harder than the other ones. Like I remember
Right.
there was a song in Hairspray where it had all these fast eighth notes, and I was like, that was the one that Frankie made me audition on, and that was
Right.
also one of the harder ones in the song for me. So I made
Right.
sure that I shed that several times before the show began, and then I'll try to leave the pit. Like I said before, a couple minutes before I have to be in there, just to like clear my head. And
Mm.
that's just for me. Like I said, when you're a little anxious, you got to give yourself moments of peace to kind of ratchet
Yeah.
it down.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
all right, I got this, and then I'm good.
Yeah. Yeah.
I
That
mean,
makes
I
a
don't get that nervous anymore subbing, but still, I still try to use the same process.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That makes a lot of sense. I did one of these follow-up videos with Sue Williams, who's now one of my subs over at Ain't Too Proud, right? And interestingly enough, like just like what you just described, she actually spreads that out over the entire day, right? So she starts early in the morning and knows, yeah, okay, I'm gonna be subbing, because she same thing, like nerves can get in the way, and I've been there. I've like
Oh yeah.
Mamma Mia was
Oh
the, the,
God.
the hardest show for me. Like this, my nerves were completely shot, right? Your nerves
My
can
nerves are
be,
shot thinking about you having to do that.
it was
that
it
book.
was terrible. It was terrible. Like and the messed up thing was that I started off really well. I started off super strong. Like the conductor came to me after my first show and was like, have you really not played this show before? And I was like, never done this before. And she was like, you did great, wonderful. Second time, nerves, sweaty palms, like dry mouth,
Yep.
you know,
Yep.
not a bad show, but just really
Yep.
uncomfortable, right?
Yep.
And then it kept going downhill, like all the way down to the fourth, fifth show. It just kept getting worse.
Yeah.
You know, until I finally I talked to another sub and flipped the switch and changed my routine, right? So dealing with nerves and giving that some room is incredibly necessary and incredibly important. As I said, like what you just said was very, very important. Like take those 20, 30 minutes, calm down. Like Sue starts early in the morning because she knows that that evening she's going to have to be playing, you know. Makes a lot of sense to me. And this is the type of information that people out there need to hear.
Yeah, I mean, I mean, you're gonna be nervous. I mean, and depending on the difficulty of the show depends on how, you know, nervous you're gonna be. And so for me and for anyone who has maybe a little bit of extra anxiety, yeah, you got to get yourself in a place where you're not shaking. Like I remember like my very first Hairspray show, my hands were actually shaking at certain points.
Oh yeah.
And it's like I was able to calm myself down enough, but obviously, you know, it's like our hands can't be shaking while we're trying to play. So it's like, you know, I mean, I was 16 years younger than I am now and less experienced. So there was a lot more like letting the anxiety consume me.
Yeah.
I'm able to handle it better now, but I still remembering those days, remembering how I felt.
Yeah.
I give myself extra time. I make sure that if I'm, off the subway, I leave extra early. I'm not giving myself any reason to be like, oh shit, I'm getting ready to be late.
Yeah.
No, just like come in there as relaxed as I can. No coffee. I don't have coffee before shows anymore.
Interesting. Okay.
Like I thought that I wanted coffee so that I could be alert. Yeah. But if you're already anxious and you don't want to be playing the show, if your heart beating in your head, because then you're, I'm sure you know about this. Like you make one mistake, and then all of a sudden you make 30 more. It's like you didn't make any mistakes, and now the moment that you've messed up something, now you're self-conscious about doing it more.
Oh yeah.
And if you had coffee to that, like it's just it's a mess.
Yeah. No, we've been there.
Yep.
Green tea is your friend. Green tea is your friend.
Yeah, tea. I had some tea before or whatever, but no, I'm good.
Yeah. No, been there. That is so important. Yeah, it's funny how like the smallest things start to get amplified in this particular situation, in this particular playing situation. I've heard it. I've heard subbing. Being likened to a recording date, and you have to get it right on the first take every time, right? And I believe there's a lot to that. That makes a lot of sense.
There is
in reality, this
and that's where the pressure comes in and the anxiety.
Oh yeah,
because you're you're not gonna get that call back if you mess up the first show, even if you're an amazing player. The MD probably be like, she can't come back, and then so all the anxiety is. It's not for nothing. It's not for no reason, but yeah, you got to learn how to deal with it and not so that you can still have the show.
Yeah, for sure. This the other thing that you just touched on earlier was with the letting the music fall to the floor and all of that. I had a sub come in recently where I was like, man, he's going to kill it. That is definitely going to happen. He's going to be one of my subs. Did not get approved. Perhaps he played, perhaps something happened, perhaps there were, cheaters or whatever. But the one thing that everybody could agree on was that something was off because the music was falling onto the floor.
Mm.
So it's something like that can be amplified in this situation. It can all of a sudden it broadcasts something that you perhaps don't want to broadcast, right? Whether you played correctly or not, if the music falls down to the floor, it might be distracting for the people next to you.
Yeah, right. So that goes back to I practice now. After Frankie put the fear of letting the pages fall, I don't do that anymore. But it was definitely something that no one told me before. I just assumed I could throw them on the floor because I'm done with them because I'm trying to make the page turns.
Right.
But there's people around you that's distracting to whatever. I will share that going back to preparing and getting to the theater, the most stressful situation I ever had as a sub was a show that I did for Frankie. called Baby It's You. We were on stage.
Yes.
And his tuner, I don't know if something had gotten flipped or whatever. I don't know exactly what happened, but he had one of those Boss tuners. But what happened was it was set like a couple inch points like out of tune. Oh. So when I started playing the show, the first couple notes, the musical director turned around and was like, what's going on? Because I was playing the notes, but I wasn't in tune with what they were. And it took me a good song or two to be like, I sound like I'm out of tune. It's not my bass. What is happening? And I realized that something had flipped where it was like, you know, how you can change it from like 440 to like 438 or something. It was like one of those things. And I was able to correct it. But I was terrified because the looks that the MD was shooting me, like it was understandable because it was like, why is this out of tune? Yeah. And it was something as simple as, you know, I got there and I had tuned, but I hadn't maybe tuned with other people and hadn't been aware that something wasn't right with my sound until the show started. And I was like, then my hands started shaking and there was like probably sweat and maybe like a little tear or something like that. I don't know what happened, but I made it through and I got approved and they loved me and everything, but I was terrified and I was like now to this day, even with my own tuner, I'm paranoid about that. I always double check. I always double check my tuning. Like I have two different tuners. Like I had the one on the floor and then one on my headstock or whatever, just to be like, you know, like one time you have something, now you have paranoid move for life.
That's a good move. No, that makes a lot of sense. And I know that look. Shelton Beckton was the MD. I know that look.
Oh yeah, he wasn't playing that. You know, my boy, he was like. I was like, he hates me. He hates me.
I know that look.
And then it came out, he liked me, and he was fine. But it was like, I was like, oh my god.
That is so.
I'm like laughing so thinking about it because I was like.
Oh man, yeah.
It's funny.
That is good stuff. No, that's so now. Okay, let's go back to the first show. All right, you're now playing the first show, first act. Everything is kind of you're settling. You're playing the show. You've prepared it obviously a lot. You know the music. You're in there. You're playing the show. And there's really like it's hard to for anyone who has not done this before. It's kind of hard to explain the feeling you have when you're playing a show for the first time that's not your chair, because it's such an involved experience, at least for me, you know. It's like your nervous system is just buzzing, you know, and you're just in it, and it can be a great feeling, I mean, for what it's worth. All right, so take us into the end of Act 1. We're going into intermission. What's happening? What does Sherisse do?
Oh, so my very first Hairspray show, you mean?
Or however, I mean, you can use Hairspray, you can use whatever show as an example. But what do you do?
Well, I'll use Hairspray as an example, and I'll use my very first show.
Yeah.
I basically kind of like got up from my chair and I just kind of tried to place myself in Lon Hoyt's like area, just because I wanted to, like, I was afraid to ask, is everything okay?
Yeah.
But I wanted to make sure that if he had something to say, that I was around to hear it.
Yeah.
And he basically said something like, good job, kid, or something, you know, whatever it was.
Yeah.
But it was like, it gave me that boost, like, okay, the second half. And I think a couple other guys in the band were like, hey, you know, you're killing it, good job. When you know, I was clearly like a lot younger people in the band, and like they all, you know, were like, good job. And then after the show, I felt better. But it's like that intermission, I kind of tried to be around, like, just, I wanted to make sure that what I was doing was okay. And maybe that's insecurity or whatever, but I wanted to make sure that if Lon had any notes for me, if there was any issues, anything I need to do, that I was available. I basically wanted to be known that I was 100% open to whatever feedback that needed to be given to me.
Yeah. That makes a lot of sense.
Which is contrary to my nature, because I was anxious and I probably would have wanted to isolate. But no, I was like, I wanted to be known, like, hey, I'm available. You know, if you need to say something to me.
Yeah. That makes a lot of sense. That makes a lot of sense. All right, so intermission is over. We're back in the seat. Second act is starting. So now, how do you deal with all of this? Where's your head at now with the second act is concerned?
So that second half, it felt good because I had gotten kind of reassurance during the intermission. Right. Now, had he come up to me and been like, all right, you know, said something more negative, then I probably would have, that second half might not have gone good, because like I said, once you would make one mistake and you're self-conscious, it keeps like a domino effect. But no, it ended up being a good second half. I came and I was actually relaxed, because I was like, got the, it's okay that I was looking for. I ended up having a good show, and I ended up getting good feedback, shortly after from Frankie, that they liked me. But I definitely was like, kind of had my ears, eyes and ears open, like, is everything okay? And like, should I be around this guy to make sure that he's, if he got something to say, I'm there, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, that makes.
And ever since that, and that band was so unique, and that the culture that that Lon had created, like, he allowed Frankie and Clint and those guys to kind of come up with their own stuff. So I think they also like the fact that I tried to do as much of Frankie's stuff as possible. Obviously, it's our job to sound like the guy, but I feel like I really tried to do as much of that as possible. And I think that came through. And I kept getting called, so I was like, okay, so I'm doing an okay job. And then less and less, my nerves got less, and then after a while, I wasn't nervous anymore.
Most definitely. It's always like kind of trying to find this balance of okay, where do I stick to what the shareholder is playing, and where do I play, or where do I get to perhaps step out a little bit. How do I interpret the improvisations that the shareholder is doing? Do I play them note for note, or do I play something that's in the style of what the shareholder is doing? Like those are really, really important decisions to make, right? And those can definitely trip you up one way or the other.
That change. I know that definitely changed over time for me, and only on that show, really, because that was the only show where I had the kind of freedom. Ever since, and that show actually got me in trouble, because that was the very first show, and I was like, oh, cool. So every show that can just be like Frankie, like here, like the ink is optional. Like, no, that's not actually how it goes. So, but I'm saying all that to say, like, it gave me confidence after a while. Once they realized I knew how Frankie was playing it, I kind of slowly started speaking in my own stuff that kind of sounded like Frankie. And then I would get and then like, I didn't get like a nasty look. So like, it would kind of give me like, okay, so they don't mind if I take my own liberties. And I never took it too far. But just because the culture that pit already had with, you had these legends in there who were coming up with other different grooves and all this other stuff, like it kind of already had a little bit of that. So that's, but other shows, like in your case, had I had a chance to do that, I was like, I wouldn't have been doing anything extra that you didn't do. I know, like,
Right. Yeah, I mean, it's just that there's one thing that I just heard over the weekend. Now in pandemic times, we tend to listen to a lot of podcasts. So one thing that I heard and that really kind of stuck with me was, reading the room of what can be done, what cannot be done, right? And I think that in and of itself is a skill that's incredibly important and incredibly necessary. Like, reading the room and reading your own headset, where your head is at, basically, is so important. What you just said in terms of, my instinct will tell me to go hide somewhere, but reality is telling me be in the environment, be with the people, and make yourself available to have conversations, for communications and all of that stuff. Is so important. It's that is a big deal. Awesome. So all right, so now we kind of touched on a lot of things already in terms of that's your first show. Where do you take it from there? Do you kind of open it up a little bit? Do you stick with it, etc., etc.? But one thing that I'm curious about is dealing with the reality of being a sub, which means that you don't get to play the show that often, right? It means that you need to find some sort of mechanism that keeps the material fresh in your mind, or that makes it possible for you to access, Is there some process that you do? I mean, of course, keeping in mind, like, photographic memory is probably helpful.
It's actually very helpful. It's very helpful, and I feel like I can cheat in this regard. Now, granted, I'll have to like maybe try to get it under my fingers again. Like I remember subbing on the show Bring It On for Carl. There's this 16th note line that it was like, really fast. I can't remember what song it was, but it was always a challenge for me.
Right.
And I would have to go back and practice that.
Yeah.
It's not that I didn't remember what the song sounded like. I just like something, I had to get something back under my fingers. But like, I never forget what the music sounds like. It's never going to be a time where I read the rhythm wrong because it's 20 times later. Like once I got it, I got it. But it's more like, is it still fresh in my fingers? And if I haven't played it in a little while, I'll just run it down in the morning and make sure I got it, or you know, in the afternoon before the hit. Yeah. But I think that's one of the times where like the way my brain is lucky, because once I get it right, I don't make the mistakes anymore. I know that sounds a little maybe like I'm trying to be arrogant, but really it's like my brain locks it in how it is. So it doesn't deviate anymore.
No, I get that.
So I guess it's a little bit of a gift.
That's perhaps a little bit of a leg up. Nevertheless, you know, you have to get to the point where you understand how to use your brain. Like that's
yeah.
You know, that's the same for everyone. Like that doesn't really change whether you have photographic memory or not. If you don't know how to access information, how to store it, and how to make sure that you store it in a way where you can recall it, you know, within the next, I'm gonna say, quarter of a year, you know, you need to find a process to get to that place. You know, it doesn't, however your brain works, you need to find you need to find a way how to unlock it, so to speak. You know, that I find very interesting, and that, you know, that really again like brings me back to the point of subbing being such an extreme environment, an extreme situation, really makes you kind of not only it's not only that your playing is under the microscope, you are under the microscope. Like your process, the way you process information, all of that is under the microscope. And you know, perhaps that's what makes it that.
And your personality.
And your personality, of course. There's no two ways about that, you know. I mean, there was one thing more that I wanted to ask about, you know, what that is concerned in terms of personality. Is there some way, because I'm certainly not, you know, the easiest person to get along, but is there something to figure out how to maneuver or how to move in a high pressure environment? Because that's really what it is. People will not always react or act the way that they usually do in a high pressure environment. Is there something to be aware of?
Yeah, it's definitely something to be aware of. And this is going to sound, I don't know, I don't want to sound the wrong way, but like for me, I'm known as a nice person. Like I'm not like, I don't like to argue. I don't try to have conflicts with people. I don't argue with people. I don't like, so I've never had it. I've never really had an issue. I mean, I maybe work with people who I didn't think were the nicest people themselves. Right. And so that kind of adjusts like how I interact with them. But like, I'm kind of going in there trying to avoid that kind of stuff. Like like, you know, I feel like I end up getting work because people are, oh no, she's easy to work with. She's not, you know, it's, you know, like I know that I got, you know, the Kinky Boots tour because they told me, it's like, yeah, you're known to have a good vibe, and we want to have a good vibe out on the road. Right. With, you know, people who are friendly and able to work together. And I think had I been known as a jerk or someone maybe more combative or more disagreeable, I might not have gotten that gig. And I'm not saying just be a pushover or whatever, but I just think I think I'm just naturally laid back. And I think I try, you know, even though people might not realize I'm kind of shy, so I don't necessarily go in there like trying to be everyone's buddy, but I try to like make it known that I'm approachable. Right. You know, and I try to make sure I always am friendly with the MD and that he knows that I'm approachable. And then everybody else, if we don't get along, I'm not as worried, but I try to come in just like being chill. And that's really, I don't have a process for that other than just to be myself.
Right. Of course. Be chill, be yourself, be cool, you know, be kind, hopefully. Go ahead.
I will add one other thing though. I will add one other thing. And I think this will maybe resonate with other women. I think this is something that women do more naturally than men. Because like because when we're assertive, and if I came in there with an attitude, if I came in there with a bit of bravado and an ego, people would be like, what's up with this, you know, B word or whatever. And it's like, it's kind of more almost accepted for a man to be a little disgruntled or a little bit disagreeable or a little bit cranky or like, you know, or whatever. It's a little bit more accepted. with y'all than with us. And so
Yeah.
I think I'm a little bit more self-conscious about not coming across. And like, I really don't like that we have to do that, but it is what it is. So I'm aware of like, all right, you know, let me just go in there and be cool.
Right. No,
I just wanted to say that because I feel like it's something that men don't think about, that we have to interact, we have to maneuver a little bit differently.
Yeah, most definitely. This is that's a very, very good point. This I certainly never think about that. Like my inclination is more going in. Not necessarily. I don't necessarily talk to a lot of people. Like I'm not, you know, trying to be standoffish or anything, but I definitely will not ask you, you know, trivia from your life. It's
right.
It's not what I'm there for. So,
right.
But
No,
you know, I totally get that. I totally get that. And that is something to keep in mind. Like, yeah, be cool. And yes, the situations are different for female players and male players. That's, you know, the way we are perceived is still very different. And there are different struggles, and no doubt about that. And I think it's important to keep that in mind, for, you know, especially for female players, but also for male players. There's no two ways about that. Very cool. Listen, Sherisse, I'm not gonna. We already talked for almost 50 minutes. Time flies. Yeah,
Time flies.
Is crazy. I won't keep you any longer. I really appreciate you being here today. This is a very, very important subject, and that's sort of the beginning of a lot of people's careers, you know, and a lot of people kind of figuring out, okay, well, maybe this theater thing, or playing in pits, or, you know, maybe I can make this my own. Subbing is a really, really good, at least that's my understanding. You know, perhaps as a last question, I wanted to get your input on that as well. Subbing is a really good way to get in, right? It's a really good way to learn the craft from the ground up. What is your take on that? Like, in the larger, bigger picture of subbing, is it a good way in? Is it sort of representative of what's going on in this environment? What do you think?
Yeah, I think I would agree. I mean, I would say that it's the way they get in, because I don't know how else other musicians, I don't know what other ways musicians are getting in without subbing. But for me, like, that was key. I mean, I subbed on Frankie's show, and then like all the other shows that he had after that I could sub on that didn't have upright, I got to work with him. And then because of that, I got to meet you, and I got to meet Carl. So it kind of, I wouldn't have gotten that, and like I wouldn't have got to know John Miller had it not been for Frankie and Hairspray. So it's all been kind of cumulative, and just being in that environment has helped me kind of know, you know, how it is. I mean, it took me 14 years of subbing to finally get my own book, to finally get my own chair with Summer. And I definitely wouldn't have been able to get that if you know, John Miller didn't, like, it almost kind of came full circle. Like, I met John Miller because I was subbing for Frankie on Hairspray 15 years ago. Right. And like, he was the one who called me. So it's like, it took that long for me to be appropriate for something or whatever. But like, that was how I do it, how I did it. And I feel like, the fact that like my very first show, when even opening night, no butterflies, no nervousness. I mean, I've been subbing for so long that I have my routine and all this other stuff. That's so like, really I would say subbing is important. Subbing is important just for that, just for like, the more that you do it, by the time you get to that 10th show, you don't have those butterflies that you had on the same one that made you not have such a good show. You can be, I'm a lot more confident in my ability to not mess up the show. And not, because I used to be so self-conscious, like, if the bass player messes up, I'm going to train wreck everything. And, now I don't have that. I'm just like, I'm confident that like, I'm not going to just the theater's not going to come crashing down because I missed something. So like, that confidence, it'll boost that confidence too. No, I was like really dramatic. I was like, man, if the bass player messes up, no, it's going to sit. I was really dramatic. Like, I took on a whole little responsibility. Which is good, but I was like, it was too much. And so now I'm like, after all these years, I mean, I'm sure if like, Mamma Mia came back up and I had to sub, or some show that was Jesus Christ Superstar, or something really hard, I would maybe have a little bit more butterflies. But for the most part, all these years of subbing and having that up and down of like that very first show and all that nervousness and realizing that you were nervous for no reason, that very first Summer show, I was like, I got this. I
Yeah.
deserve to be here.
Yeah,
I'm
yeah, yeah,
needed
yeah,
here.
yeah,
So
yeah, yeah. Very, very important point. Very important point. This, after coming from this subbing background, your butterflies are gone. I can totally attest to that. Like you are not going to have butterflies anymore. It doesn't. It just doesn't happen. All the repetitions that go into learning material, all the instrument knowledge, be it electric, be it upright, it doesn't really matter. All of that is gone because you have done so much in this high pressure environment, and you come out on the other side of it. So this,
yep.
yeah, I totally get that. I totally get it. Well, listen, Sherisse, thank you so much for making yourself available today. I really appreciate this time together. I think this is very, very good information that doesn't necessarily get talked about enough. Um, and that perhaps can inspire and motivate people to give this a try, and also give them some very concrete ideas and concepts of what to do once they are in the situation. So um,
Yeah,
again, this I cannot thank you enough. I think this is really good
you're welcome.
information. All right.
I'm happy to share.
Oh, please. Yeah, absolutely. So, in all that, stay safe, stay sane out there. And, hopefully we get to do this again in the not too distant future. Let me put it this way. I mean,
I hope so too, George.
all right.
Thank you.
You got it.
All right.